The seal had not spoken in 400 years. It sat on its plinth at the far end of the great hall, a disk of black iron as wide as a man's chest, older than the Veilthorn line itself, older than the wall of wolves carved above the throne. My grandfather had pressed his palm to it on his coronation day and felt nothing. My father had done the same. I had pressed my own hand to it the morning I was crowned, and it had given me only cold metal and silence. The scholars said the seal recognized the true Luna of the bloodline, the one fated to stand beside the Alpha King. They said it when they were feeling generous. The rest of the time, even they had stopped believing. I had stopped believing long before I took the throne. So when Lord Cade brought the woman before me on a gray winter morning, her wrists in iron and her dress still carrying the snow of the royal forest, I expected nothing unusual. Trespassers came before me twice a week. They were fined, remanded, sent home. I signed the papers and returned to the weight of governing a kingdom that had more cracks in it than any wall could hide. Caught at dawn on the king's eastern boundary, Cade announced, loud enough for the full gallery to hear. He enjoyed the gallery. No pack, no rank document, no name the register holds. He said it the way men say such things when they want the room to laugh, and the room obliged. A murmur ran the length of the gallery, lords and court officials leaning to one another, pleased to have something small to be amused by before the midday meal. I looked at her. She did not look at the floor. That was the first thing. Every trespasser I had ever seen brought before this court looked at the floor, from shame, from fear, from the simple instinct of making oneself small before power. This woman looked at me, not with defiance, not with accusation, with a steady, waiting calm, as if she had come here on an errand and was simply waiting for the errand to be completed. Her dress was plain wool, mended at the hem. Her dark hair was pulled back from a face that was composed in a way that had nothing to do with effort. It was simply what her face did. She was not performing dignity. She was made of it. "What were you doing on the eastern boundary?" I asked. "Following the boundary markers, my lord." Her voice carried easily in the stone hall. "They are marked in iron, and I am a smith's daughter. I know iron markers from tree roots. I was following the markers back to the village path when your lord's men intercepted me." Cade made a sound of dismissal. She claims she was lost. She had no pass, no sponsor, no pack seal. The law is clear. It was clear. And she had offered no argument against it, only an account, given plainly. I found myself watching the way she stood. Feet settled, shoulders easy, hands quiet, despite the iron at her wrists. There was no performance of calm here. She simply was calm. Something shifted in my chest, low and quiet, like an ember turning over an ash. My wolf, long dormant in the daily business of kingship, raised its head. I told it to be still. I did not understand it. I returned to procedure. "The dismissal right," I said. "Standard for all cases of trespass without documentation. The accused approaches the iron seal and presses a palm. If the seal recognizes a bond to the royal pack, a servant's mark, a family's ancient compact, anything recorded in the iron's memory, it glows faintly and the charge is reduced. If it remains dark, as it almost always did, the fine stands. It had never done anything more than that. The Luna recognition was legend, a story the old women told. Sarah, I learned her name from the charge document, though no one in the gallery had used it, walked to the plinth without ceremony. She did not look at the seal with awe or hope. She looked at it the way she had looked at me, simply, clearly, willing to accept what it said. Her hand rose and she pressed her palm flat against the black iron. For one breath, nothing. Then the seal ignited, not faintly. Not the small copper glows of a servant's compact or a minor family tie. Gold, deep and blazing, the color of something that had been held back for 400 years and was now done. Holding, poured from beneath her hand and ran every engraved line of the disc at once. The wolves carved into the iron stood up in light. The entire hall went silent in the space of a single heartbeat. The gallery leaning forward as one body, the laughter of 30 seconds ago erased entirely. And in my chest, at the exact same moment, something cracked open. It was not pain. It was the opposite of pain. The sudden warm collapse of a wall I had not known I was maintaining. A recognition so certain and so deep that it arrived not as a feeling but as a fact. Her. Not a question, not a hope. A fact the oldest part of me had always known, and simply been waiting for the rest of me to catch up with. My wolf did not rise. My wolf bowed. I was on my feet before I understood I had stood. The gallery stirred. I heard Cade inhale sharply. Heard the rustle of robes as the court officials found their own feet out of reflex, unsure what protocol applied to something none of them had ever witnessed. Lord Haven, who had laughed loudest at her no-rank status 20 minutes ago, had gone the color of new plaster. Sarah was looking at her own hand. The gold light was still moving under her palm, slow and certain, like a tide that had finally come in. She lifted her eyes to me. And in them I saw not triumph, not vindication, not even surprise. I saw wonder, quiet and genuine, a woman encountering something she had not expected but was not afraid of. I came down from the dais. I had not walked to the plinth in years. The court parted for me without a word. I stopped before her, and for a moment we simply looked at one another, the Alpha King of Valethorn and the Smith's daughter who had followed iron markers at dawn. The seal was still burning between us. "Sarah," I said, because her name was in the charge document, and because it seemed important to use it, to say it aloud in this hall, in front of these men who had not thought to use it once. The iron seal of Valethorn has not spoken in 400 years. It speaks now. I turned, not away from her, but to the hall, to Cad, to Hyven, to the Thurdelters and officials who stood in stunned quiet in the gallery. Every record the seal holds is law. What it names, the kingdom names, and it has named this woman. Hyven's mouth opened. I did not let him speak. "You will address her as my Luna from this moment," I said. "Or you will not address her at all. Those are the only options available to you." I turned back to her. The light from the seal was easing now, settling into the iron as if satisfied, as if it had done the one thing it had been, waiting all those centuries to do, and was now simply at rest. I reached out and took her wrist, gently, slowly, a question in the care of it, and she did not pull away. The bond mark came then, not like fire, but like warmth. A ring of gold at her wrist, a mirror of the mark that had lived on mine since my coronation, and never had an answer. It had an answer now. "I don't have a rank document," she said quietly. There was no apology in it. She was simply noting a fact, the way she had noted the iron markers in the forest. "You have something older than a document," I said. "You have the seal's word, and mine." The first one to bow was Lorne, the oldest of the court officials, a man of 70, who had served 3 Alpha Kings, and had long given up expecting wonders. He bent at the waist without flourish, without being told, the way men bow when something is simply true. Then, one by one, the gallery followed. Haven last, his face in a complicated arrangement I did not spare much attention for. He bowed. I looked at Sarah. She looked back at me with that same steadiness, that same willingness to accept what was true. And something in it shifted, the waiting leaving her face, replaced by something softer and less guarded. Not fragile, never fragile, just open. The way a door is open that has always been locked. "I came here for justice," she said, "not for this." "I know," I said. "That is exactly why the seal chose you. I sent for new clothes, for chambers, for the court scribe, to strike the charge from the record and write something else in its place. I sent for no one who would crowd her or make ceremonies before she was ready. There would be time enough for ceremony. The kingdom would need its pageant. The lords would need to see it made formal. The pack would need to be told. The old scholars would need to revise their most pessimistic footnotes about the seal's silence. All of that would come. That evening I found her standing at the long window of the east chamber, looking out over the Valethorn Valley in the blue winter dusk, the gold mark at her wrist catching the last light. I stood in the doorway and did not announce myself, and for a moment I simply let myself have the strange peace of knowing where she was, of the wall in my chest being gone and not mourning it. She heard me, of course. The bond was new, but it was thorough. "It is a very old kingdom," she said, without turning, not nervous, simply observing. "It is," I said. "It has been waiting a long time for something." She turned then and looked at me the way she had looked at me across the hall, clearly, without pretense, without performance. "Well," she said, "I suppose I can stay." It was not a grand declaration. It was not a vow or a ceremony. It was a woman of complete honesty saying the truest available thing, and that was worth more to me than any court pageant the lords could devise. I had ruled a kingdom for 19 years with an iron seal that would not speak and a bond mark that had no answer. I had learned to govern without hope of those things, and I had done it well enough. But the valley below was the same valley, and yet entirely different now, because she was standing in my window looking at it. The seal was at rest on its plinth in the empty hall, its 400-year waiting done, and in my chest, where the cold had been so long I had mistaken it for simply the natural temperature of a king's heart, there was warmth. Sarah stayed. She had not come for recognition or for a crown or to be made into something she was not. She had come following iron markers at dawn and found, at the end of them, a door that had been waiting with her name on it. I spent the rest of my years learning that this was entirely in keeping with her character. She never sought what was hers. She only ever followed what was true, and what was true always, in the end, found its way to her hand.